Hey everyone! Today we will be making a pop art inspired poster using artwork by Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein as inspiration. First, a little bit of history. Emerging in the UK and the US in the mid to late 1950s and peaking in the 1960s, the pop art movement challenged fine art traditions by incorporating imagery from popular culture, such as advertising, comic books, and even celebrities. Key characteristics of the movement include simplified designs, saturated colors, and the use of everyday commercial objects. Artists employed a variety of techniques. What we're seeing here today is a silkscreen and a painting. Did you know that the Photoshop software that you are working in right now is derived from older processes such as printmaking and darkroom photography? If you take a printmaking and photo class, you'll begin to notice overlapping terminology such as masking, feathering, burning, and dodging. Pop artists like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein used these older techniques to celebrate or critique consumer culture and media through their artwork. Looking at Warhol's silkscreen of Marilyn Monroe, we will be using the threshold adjustment layer in Photoshop to separate the highlights from the contours. This adjustment layer also mimics the grunge texture that we see in this print. We will also incorporate a halftone filter like we're seeing in Roy Lichtenstein's painting from 1964. This halftone texture will add a sort of comic style texture to our artwork. Remember, it's perfectly fine to take inspiration from other artists, but you should never copy someone else's work directly. Your final piece should be unique. For this exercise, we are using a public domain image from Unsplash.com provided by the Good Faces agency. When using another person's image in your artwork, make sure it is public domain or that you have the artist's written consent. Oh, and a good rule of thumb is to alter the image by at least 60% to create something original. Our class exercises are protected as they fall under the fair use laws, since we're using images strictly for educational purposes. However, as you move forward in your career and create work for publication, copying someone else's work or ignoring image ethics can have serious consequences. Just ask Shepard Fairey. Alright, now we are going to create our pop art inspired image. Before we get started, you will need to download the exercise image linked in the YouTube video description. I have the image right here on my desktop. In a previous video, we learned how to open an image in Photoshop by clicking and dragging the image over the Photoshop icon and dropping it in. And now we have opened the image in Photoshop. We're going to save it right away. If you are a student in my college class, I'd recommend saving it to your desktop because you may need to upload it to the learning management platform. However, if you're an independent learner, just watching for fun, save it however you want. So let's go to File, Save As. It's immediately set to a JPEG because the image itself is a JPEG, so let's change the format to Photoshop. And we will see, as we change the format, the file extension will change to .psd. Once you've set it to a PSD, you'll have the option to save it to Cloud documents. So if you'd rather save it to your cloud, you can do that. And you're going to rename the file. We'll do exercise image. And then we're going to hit save. Now remember, when you save files to Creative Cloud, they do save automatically as you work. However, if you save this file to your computer, to your desktop, as you make updates, you will periodically have to go to File, Save. It's grayed out now, but once you start actually making updates, you'll be able to click that. All right, so let's get started. In the contextual taskbar down here, you have this button called Select Subject. You're going to go ahead and click that. It's going to take a little while to load, but ultimately, this will select the subject of your image for you. This works best when you have a high contrast image with a dark subject and a light background, or a light subject and a dark background, so Photoshop can really detect the edges of the image. Now, there are much better ways to manually select objects with the selection tools. However, this video is aimed towards very early beginners, so I'm going to skim over this and go over selection tools more in depth in a future video. Once you have the object selected, you will see what are called marching ants that indicate the selection. And so now we're going to go to select and mask. It may take a moment, but a new window is going to pop up here. All right, here we go. It's always just a little slow. So masking is a non-destructive way to hide and reveal parts of an image without deleting them. This may seem confusing now, but I will cover layer masking in depth in the future. In the properties panel here, you'll see what's called a view mode, and you can open the view mode and look through a variety of ways to view your mask. Personally, I like to view it on black and white. Remember, with layer masking, black hides and white reveals. So part of the reason I like the black and white view is that I can see exactly what's being hidden and what's being revealed. I also like black and white because I can more easily see the texture, especially when working with curly hair, and you get to see how well the mask is revealing the texture. Speaking of the hair, there's a button up here called Refine Hair, which if you click it will give you a more accurate mask when masking textured objects. So now that I've clicked it, we get an even clearer mask refining the hair. All right, we're not gonna look too much at any of these sliders or features. Instead, we're just gonna go all the way down to Output 2, and we're gonna change this to Output 2, New Layer with Layer Mask. And then we're gonna hit OK. And if we go to our layers panel, we'll see that Photoshop has added a second layer with a layer mask. Our background layer is still there. And if I were to click the I button, you'd see the original photo, and now you'll see the mask. I'm going to double click to rename our new layer, and I'm going to rename it Subject. All right, so moving on to adjustments. If you open your adjustments panel, you should find an adjustment called Threshold. What Threshold does is it converts your image to only black and white. White being the highlights and black being the contours. If you take the slider that you see on the histogram and move it to the left, you'll get more whites. If you move it to the right, you'll get more blacks. If you move it all the way to either side, you will eventually create a silhouette of the image, which is kind of cool. But we want something in the middle that's going to keep a nice balance of the highlights and shadows. And I'm just going to highlight this number and type in 60. I know that 60 is going to give us a nice balance. You can play around with that. Now we're going to go back to adjustments, and we are going to look for a gradient map adjustment. You're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and find the gradient map adjustment layer. You'll see that it's been added to your layers panel here, and the gradient map automatically pulled a gradient straight from your foreground and background. You can change the colors by double-clicking this bar. Now, what the gradient map will do is add some colors to the image. So you can open these folders and look at basics. I actually want the darker color on the left and the lighter color on the right. You can open the blues folder and play around with what they already have. But today, we are actually going to put in our own custom colors. So these little knobs here are called stops, and we're going to double click the black stop, and our color picker appears. And you can pick any color, and it will change all of the blacks to the color that you picked. Down here, we have a little number, and we can type in a color code called a hex code to get a very specific color. So we're going to type in the number 370146. That's going to give us this nice rich purple. and hit OK. Now we're going to double click the white stop and we're going to type in the number C30185 and then we're going to hit OK. Now I want you to right click the subject layer and click Convert to Smart Object. What turning this layer into a smart object will do is it will allow us to add filters that will not permanently alter the image. So let's go ahead and add a filter. Before you do that, make sure that your foreground and background are set to the default black foreground and white background. If you don't have this set, it's going to mess with our halftone. So now let's go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and select the halftone pattern. I already have mine selected. Make sure you have the size set to 5, the contrast set to 2, and the pattern type set to dot, and go ahead and hit OK. So now we've incorporated this really nice halftone layer, and right here you'll see the filter right under your smart filters, and you can hide it and show it. You can even double click it to edit it if you wanted to change the numbers and play around with it, and hit OK. All right, now we're going to add some text. So go ahead and grab your type tool. Right now my vertical type tool is the face of the text tool. So I'm going to hold that down and make sure that I have horizontal type tool selected. I'm going to click and drag, and we're going to add some text that is going to go behind our image. And it doesn't matter what you type. I am just going to write, I see you. And in the properties panel, we're going to pick a font. And I'm just going to find a font that's in my recents. I really like a Brill Fat Face italicized. You might not have that typeface, so go ahead and just pick one that you have. And let's change the size. I want it to take up the whole artboard, so let's bump it up to 300. Try 400. Let's do 425 and see how big that gets. We're almost there. All right, 441. I'm going to grab my move tool and move my text to an area that I like. Now you'll see that this blue bounding box is much bigger than the text itself. You can change that. Double click on the T in the layers panel, and you can make the bounding box smaller so it doesn't take up too much space. I want you to notice something. If I move my text layer above my gradient map, my text is actually black. But once it's moved below the gradient map, it's getting impacted by the colors that I set in the gradient map. So I need you to remember that because that's going to come up in a little bit here. I want my text to be behind the subject. And now I want to add a nice background. I'm going to click this little circle here at the bottom of the layers panel. And I'm going to scroll up and click solid color. Now it doesn't matter what color you choose because the color is getting impacted by the gradient maps. So how do we fix this? We don't want the gradient map or the threshold to impact every single layer below it. We only want it to impact our subject. So I'm going to click threshold. And this little icon here with the square and the arrow pointed down, if I click that, now the threshold only impacts the layer right below it. Now, if I do the same thing with gradient map, the gradient map will only impact the threshold right below it. So now it's not infiltrating on our entire canvas. So now that we've clipped these layers, I can double click my color fill and pick any color that I would like without it getting impacted by the gradient map. However, I actually want to keep the color consistent with the palette I've chosen, and I want this pink. As I drag my cursor off the color picker, it allows me to pick whatever color is anywhere. I can pick gray, like the pasteboard, but I actually want this pink. So all I have to do is click it and hit OK. Now, where did my text go? I had a text box. Now I can't find it. Whenever you think you've lost a layer or an element, go back to your layers panel maybe make it bigger, and notice that the text is underneath the color fill. We just need to move it up. And now I want my text to be this nice purple color, so I'm going to double click the T icon, and that highlights all my text. I'm going to go to swatches, and I'm going to grab that purple because the purple has been placed in my recent swatches. And we're going to click OK. Now, so far, it looks like a really nice composition. It doesn't feel fully balanced. I'm going to move this box down just a little bit. If I hold down Shift, it will move straight, whereas if I don't hold down Shift, it might move around too much. So click and hold down Shift and bring it down just a little bit. All right, so looking at this composition, I still feel like it's missing something. I think it needs a little more contrast, so I'm going to grab the rectangle shape tool to add a shape in the back. Try to not mix this up with the rectangle marquee tool. That can be a common mistake. So go ahead and just click and drag and make a long rectangle. I'm going off of my artboard. And I think I had my gradient selected because it automatically filled in with a gradient. There are 3 ways that you can change the fill of the rectangle. You have the fill here in the properties panel, here in your options bar, and here in your contextual taskbar. It doesn't matter which one you use. I'm going to click the one in my properties panel, and I do have the gradient option selected. You can also grab swatches and play with the swatches that you have. Up here in the options panel, it kind of looks exactly the same as it did in the properties panel, so it really doesn't matter. If you end up picking a color and then you realize you don't really like it, you can also go back to the rectangle layer here and double click on this little icon in the thumbnail. It looks kind of like a wireframe. Double click that and your color picker will come up. Personally, the color picker is one of my go-to ways of changing colors, and I've already picked out a custom color. So go ahead and assign it the color 3EF0C8. I think a nice teal will go really well with the colors we've chosen. So now I want to rotate the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the rectangle tool while I have the rectangle layer selected. And I'm going to hover over the corner and you'll see this curved arrow. That allows me to rotate the rectangle. I can also adjust the size if I want it to be a thicker boy. I'm going to rotate it some more. Diagonal lines tend to add some nice movement and directional force to keep the composition interesting. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to grab my move tool so I can move it up and down and find out if I'm really happy with the placement. So go ahead and kind of move it around and figure out where you want it placed. I kind of like it right here. Notice that if you move the rectangle tool too far below, you kind of lose the form of our subject's bottom lip. And I really like that, so I want to keep it. And I'm going to move the rectangle here. All right, and there you have it. We've created a poster. You get the halftones inspired by Lichtenstein. You get the bright colors and the threshold and texture inspired by Andy Warhol. And now all we have to do is save it. So I'm going to show you how to save this as a JPEG. Go ahead and go up to File and hit Save as a Copy. Once you hit Save as a Copy, you have to go to Format and select the kind of file type you want. There's so many. Today, let's hit JPEG. And we're gonna go ahead and hit save. You can pick where you wanna save it. If you don't have these folders, again, you can collapse and uncollapse that box to get the folders. I'm just gonna save it right to my desktop. I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. Quality from 10 to 12 is pretty good. We're just gonna hit OK. And we're going to take a look at what this looked like. Now it's on my desktop. We can open it up. And here we have our very own pop art inspired image. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.